I was standing in my empty apartment at 40 years old, holding an eviction notice in one hand and my last $20 bill in the other. My wife had just left me. My business had collapsed. I had negative $847,000 in my bank account. I remember looking at myself in the bathroom mirror that night, barely recognizing the broken man staring back at me. I had two choices: give up completely or make one last impossible bet on myself. 5 years later, I'm worth over $3 million. But this isn't a story about money. This is a story about what happens when you lose absolutely everything and have to rebuild yourself from nothing. What I'm about to share with you changed my entire life, and if you're struggling right now, I promise you'll want to hear every single word. My name is Marcus, and at 35 years old, I thought I had it all figured out. I owned a successful construction company that had been growing steadily for 8 years. We had major contracts, a team of 40 employees, and revenue that was climbing year after year. My wife Sarah and I lived in a beautiful 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. We drove nice cars. We took vacations. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But I was making one critical mistake that I didn't even realize at the time. I was over-leveraging everything, taking massive loans to expand faster and faster, convinced that the growth would never stop. I ignored the warning signs. I ignored my accountant's concerns. I ignored that knot in my stomach that told me something wasn't right. Then 2019 hit, and everything changed overnight. 3 of my biggest clients suddenly canceled their contracts within the same month. The economy was shifting, and commercial construction projects were being put on hold everywhere. I had massive equipment loans, warehouse leases, payroll for 40 people, and suddenly my revenue dropped by 70% in just 60 days. I tried everything to save it. I worked 20-hour days, I took out personal loans, I maxed out every credit card I had. I borrowed money from family members, promising them I'd pay it back within months, but it was like trying to bail water out of a sinking ship with a teaspoon. By the time I was 40, I had to declare bankruptcy. The business I'd spent nearly a decade building was gone. The house was foreclosed, the cars were repossessed, and Sarah, the woman I'd been married to for 12 years, told me she couldn't do this anymore and left. I'll never forget the day I moved into that tiny studio apartment with nothing but 2 suitcases and a sleeping bag. Everything I owned in the world fit into the trunk of my friend's car. I was 40 years old and starting over with less than nothing. I didn't just have $0. I had negative $847,000 in debt that would follow me for years. Some nights I would just sit on the floor of that empty apartment and cry. I felt like such a failure. I felt ashamed. I felt like everyone who ever believed in me had been wrong. My parents didn't understand what happened. My friends stopped calling. Even my own brother told me I should just get a regular job and stop trying to be an entrepreneur. The depression was suffocating. There were mornings I couldn't get out of bed. There were days I couldn't eat. I would wake up at 3 a.m. with panic attacks, my heart racing, thinking about all the people I'd let down, all the money I'd lost, all the years I'd wasted. I was too embarrassed to go out in public because I was afraid I'd run into someone I used to know. I felt like I had a giant letter F for failure stamped on my forehead. The worst part wasn't even the financial devastation. It was the complete loss of identity. For 15 years, I'd been Marcus, the successful business owner. Now, I was just Marcus, the bankrupt, divorced failure, living in a studio apartment at 40. I had to ask myself the hardest question I'd ever faced. Who am I without all the things I built? Who am I when everything is stripped away? One night, about 2 months after losing everything, I was scrolling through my phone looking at old photos from better times. I saw pictures of the business, the team, the projects we'd completed. And instead of just feeling sad, something shifted inside me. I realized something crucial. I hadn't lost my skills. I hadn't lost my knowledge. I hadn't lost my ability to work hard. I had lost money and things and status, but I hadn't lost me. The experience that got me into this mess was actually valuable. I now knew exactly what not to do. I understood financial management in a way I never had before because I'd seen firsthand what happens when you don't respect it. I knew the warning signs of overexpansion because I'd ignored them and paid the ultimate price. I made a decision that night. I decided that my story wasn't over. I decided that this bankruptcy, this divorce, this complete collapse wasn't going to be the end of my story. It was going to be the middle, the hard middle, the part where the main character faces their darkest moment before the comeback. I took out a notebook and I started writing. I wrote down every skill I had. I wrote down every lesson I'd learned from my failure. I wrote down exactly what I would do differently if I ever got another chance. And then I wrote down a plan, not a fantasy, not a get-rich-quick scheme, a real, practical, step-by-step plan to rebuild. The next morning, I did something that terrified me. I reached out to an old colleague named James who ran a small contracting business. I told him the truth about everything that had happened. I expected him to reject me, to not want anything to do with a bankrupt failure, but instead, he said something I'll never forget. "Marcus, everyone who's ever done anything significant has failed. The question is, did you learn from it?" He offered me a job as a project manager. It wasn't glamorous. It paid $55,000 a year, which was about a quarter of what I used to make. But it was a start. It was a foothold. I took that job, and I worked like I'd never worked before. For the first year, I lived on almost nothing. That studio apartment cost $800 a month. I rode a bicycle to work because I couldn't afford a car. I ate rice and beans most nights. Every single extra dollar I made went toward paying off debt and building a tiny emergency fund. People thought I was crazy for living so frugally, but I had learned my lesson about lifestyle inflation. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. While I was working for James, I started doing something else in the evenings and weekends. I began consulting for small construction companies, helping them with project management and bidding strategies. I charged very little at first, just $50 an hour, because I needed to rebuild my reputation and my confidence. But word started to spread. Business owners liked that I was honest about my past failure and what I'd learned from it. Within 18 months, my consulting side business was making me an extra $2,000 a month. I saved every penny of it. By age 42, I had saved $30,000. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had in years, and it was clean money. Money I'd earned through honest work and careful saving. That's when I saw an opportunity. A small general contracting company was struggling and looking to sell. The owner was retiring, and his kids didn't want to take over. The business was doing about $500,000 a year in revenue, but was poorly managed. I knew I could turn it around. I approached the owner with a proposal. I would buy the business for $50,000 down and pay the rest over 5 years from the profits. It was risky, and I was terrified of failing again. But I also knew that playing it safe forever wasn't going to get me where I wanted to be. He agreed. At 42 years old, I was a business owner again. But this time, everything was different. This time, I ran the business with completely different principles. I kept overhead brutally low. I didn't take out any loans. I didn't expand until we had the cash reserves to support it. I focused on profit margins instead of just revenue. I built systems and processes so the business could run without me killing myself with 20-hour days. Most importantly, I managed the money properly. I kept 6 months of operating expenses in the bank at all times. I never over-leveraged. I made decisions based on sustainability, not ego. The business started growing steadily, not explosively, but consistently. That first year, we did $650,000 in revenue, and I paid myself a modest $75,000 salary. The second year, we hit $980,000, and I paid myself $95,000. I was still living in that same studio apartment, still saving aggressively, still rebuilding. Year 3 was the breakthrough. We landed several major contracts with a commercial developer who loved our reliability and quality. We finished the year at $1.8 million in revenue, and I finally paid myself a six-figure salary. But more importantly, the business was profitable and stable. By age 45, just 5 years after losing everything, the business was doing $3.2 million in annual revenue. I had paid off over $400,000 of my bankruptcy debt. I had $850,000 in savings and investments. The business itself was worth approximately $1.5 million based on valuations I'd received. My net worth had gone from negative $847,000 to positive $3.1 million in just 5 years. But here's what I want you to understand. The money isn't the real story. The real story is who I became in the process. I'm a completely different person now than I was at 35 when I thought I had it all figured out. That old Marcus was arrogant. He thought he was invincible. He made decisions based on ego and impressing other people. He spent money to look successful rather than to build actual wealth. He didn't listen to advice. He thought failure could never happen to him. The new Marcus is humble. I know how quickly everything can disappear. I make decisions based on sustainability and long-term thinking. I spend money on things that matter and save the rest. I listen to smart people and learn constantly. I know that failure isn't just possible. It's probable if you don't respect the fundamentals. I also learned something profound about happiness. When I had the big house and the fancy cars and the impressive business, I wasn't actually happy. I was stressed constantly. I was always chasing the next thing, the next level, the next achievement. Now, even though I'm worth more on paper, I live more simply. I'm in a modest 2-bedroom apartment that I actually love. I drive a reliable used car. I spend my money on experiences and relationships and giving back, not on impressing people I don't even like. And I'm genuinely happy in a way I never was before. Let me share the specific lessons that took me from bankrupt at 40 to millionaire at 45. Because if you're struggling right now, these might change your life too. First, your failure doesn't define you unless you let it. I could have stayed bitter and broken and blamed the economy or bad luck or other people. Instead, I took full responsibility and decided to learn from it. That shift in mindset was everything. Second, you must manage your money properly. I don't care how much you make. If you don't save, if you over-leverage, if you spend everything you earn, you will eventually face a crisis. Build emergency funds. Avoid debt whenever possible. Live below your means. These aren't sexy principles, but they're what actually build lasting wealth. Third, your network is your net worth, but not in the way people usually mean it. It's not about knowing rich or famous people. It's about maintaining good relationships with good people. James gave me a chance when I had nothing because I'd always treated him with respect years earlier. The clients who hired my consulting services did so because they trusted my character even after my business failed. Treat people well always, because you never know when you'll need them. Fourth, start before you're ready. I was terrified to start that consulting business. I was terrified to buy that small company. But waiting until everything is perfect means you'll never start. You have to make moves even when you're scared, even when you're not fully ready. Fifth, focus on adding value, not making money. When I focused obsessively on revenue and growth, I lost everything. When I focused on doing excellent work and solving real problems for clients, the money followed naturally. That shift in focus changed everything. Today, I'm 45 years old, and I'm building something sustainable. I'm building something I'm proud of. I'm building something that doesn't just look impressive, but actually is solid. I've even started reconnecting with my ex-wife, Sarah. We're not back together, and we may never be, but we're friends again. She told me recently that she's proud of how I turned things around. That meant more to me than the money ever could. If you're watching this video and you're going through something hard right now, I want you to know something. Your current circumstances are not your final destination. Bankruptcy at 40 didn't have to mean poverty at 50. It could mean millionaire at 45 and wisdom for a lifetime. The breakdown can become the breakthrough if you let it. Whatever you've lost, whatever mistakes you've made, whatever people think about you right now, none of that determines what happens next. You determine what happens next. I'm not special. I'm not extraordinarily talented. I don't have some secret advantage. I'm just a regular person who failed catastrophically and then decided to get back up and do it differently. If I can go from negative $847,000 at age 40 to a net worth over $3 million at 45, then whatever comeback you're trying to make is absolutely possible. You just have to decide that your story isn't over yet. You have to decide that the hard middle is worth pushing through to get to the good ending. Thank you for watching my story. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, it's not about how hard you fall. It's about whether you get back up. I'm living proof that you can lose everything and build it back even better than before. Your comeback starts now.